The Best Guide Indian and European Classical Literature by Dr. A. Kalam. 2nd edition. 1. The Book of Assembly Hall, Vyasa Introduction, the Mahabharata. The vast Sanskrit poem is a remarkable collection of epics, legends, romances, theology and ethical and metaphysical doctrine. The core of this great work is the epic struggle between 5 heroic brothers, the Pandavas and their 100 contentious cousins for rule of the land. Adiparva, the book of the beginning, was more or less a closed whole, the ancestry of the protagonists and antagonists, their youth, early strife and clouded claims on the succession, the attempts at assassination and the safe deliverance of the Pandavas, their self-exile and glorious reappearance at Draupadi's bridegroom choice, their consequent marriage, alliance with Panchala and recognition by the senior Kauravas, and finally the acquisition of the kingdom of Indraprastha by the partition of the field of the Kurus. Peace was restored in the end between the 2 branches of siblings through the wise guidance of their elders. The end of Adiparva has left us with the mild satisfaction that some attractive noble youths, after some bad luck and some good in the end, did not fare so ill. Brief story of the Book of the Assembly Hall. Book 2, the Book of the Assembly Hall, is an epic dramatization of the Vedic ritual of consecration that is central to the book. Assembly Hall is a kind of longhouse for the men in which to hold council and entertainment, and it is from such a hall that the Parva takes its title. This book is about how Maya erects the palace and court, Sabha, at Indraprastha, life at the court, Yudhishthira's Rajasuya Yajna, the game of dice and the eventual exile of the Pandavas. There are 2 halls involved, the one at Indraprastha and other at Hastinapura. It is Indraprastha hall that becomes a bone of contention. The hall at Indraprastha was newly built by an Asura, Maya, who had been saved from the fire of the Khandava forest, which concluded the Adiparva. So magnificent was that hall that it excited the envy of Pandav's cousin Duryodhan, and this envy led to the game at dice. Pandavas were invited by Dhritarashtra, who was forced to do so by his eldest son Duryodhan, for a game of dice. Shakuni, maternal uncle of Duryodhan, provokes Yudhishthira and plays the game of dice in place of his nephew Duryodhan, and by deceit wins everything Yudhishthira possesses. Yudhishthira loses his entire kingdom but is given back all as a boon to Draupadi by Dhritarashtra, as she gets insulted in the open court after Yudhishthira loses her in the gamble. The Pandavas are again invited back for one more game of dice, and they play for one stake, i.e. exile into the woods for 12 plus 1 years, to live unrecognized in the 13th year in some place, and if they are recognized in the 13th year, then they would again go back into exile for another 12 years. Pandavas again lose to Shakuni and are sent to exile. This book also gives details of how and why the trio Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima kill Jasanta, and how Krishna kills Shishupla. Detailed summary of the Book of the Assembly Hall. 1. Arjuna had saved Mayasura when the Khandava forest was burnt. Maya wanted to do some favor in return and requested Arjuna to ask for something. But Arjuna advised him to do whatever Krishna wanted to be done. Maya decided to build a palatial assembly hall according to Krishna for Yudhishthira. Krishna stayed with the Pandavas happily at Khandavaprastha. After some time, he desired to leave for Dwarka to see his father. Having obtained permission from Kunti and Yudhishthira, he set out for Dwarka. Maya went to the mountain Mainka lying on the north of Kailas, which was in the northeast region, and brought a club, conch and building material composed of crystals and jewels. He presented that mighty club to Bhima and the conch named Devdatta to Arjuna, and built a mansion for Dharmaraj. 2 Pandavas were in the assembly along with great people. At that time the divine sage Nada came there to meet them affectionately. Yudhishthira, accompanied by his brothers, honored him. Nada felt very happy and asked Dharmaraj whether he had divided his time judiciously following them, Artha and Kama accordingly. On hearing the words of Nada, Yudhishthira bowed to him and promised that he would act on his word. 20 The best guide Indian and European classical literature. The Book of the Assembly, Hall 21 only. He then followed the words of Nada and his kingdom spread up to the ocean. Yudhishthira praised Nada for his advice, and requested him to describe the celestial palaces, built by Maya. Nada gave a description of the palaces of Indra, Yam, Varuna, Kuber and Brahma, and said that he saw them all in the previous ages, and the palace of Dharmaraj was the best on the earth. Then Yudhishthira asked Nada what was the greatness of Harishchandra by which he competed even with Indra. Then Nada started describing the merits of Harishchandra, and said that that king became both resplendent and famous by virtue of the blessings he received from the Brahmans that were satisfied with the charity of the king. Hence he was given the place of honor in the court of Indra. A king who performs the Rajasuya sacrifice will stay with Indra happily. Nada also says, your father, who was astonished at the prosperity of Harishchandra, came to know that I was visiting the earth, and sent a message to you through me in which he asked you to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice as you were capable of defeating all the kings on the earth. And having advised Yudhishthira to fulfill the desire of his father, Nada took leave of him, and went to Dwarka, accompanied by the sages. Later Yudhishthira consulted with his brothers regarding the performance of Rajasuya. 3. In order to fulfill the desire of his father Pandu, Yudhishthira decided to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. Then he consulted with his brothers, priests, ministers, Dhamya and Vyasa again and again. Everyone was of the opinion that Yudhishthira was eligible to perform the sacrifice. Then Dharmaraj asked Krishna to make a final decision about Rajasuya. Krishna said that Yudhishthira, being endowed with all the virtues, was qualified to perform the sacrifice. Just then Jasandha became an emperor, having defeated all the kings. Now the whole world was under his control. Krishna said that as long as Jasandha was alive, Yudhishthira could not complete successfully the Rajasuya. Jasandha had kept under custody a number of kings. And if at all Yudhishthira wanted to perform the sacrifice, he should first try to release the kings from prison by killing Jasandha. Having heard Krishna's words, Yudhishthira said that Krishna was their authority for everything. Then Bhima said that even a weak person could defeat a strong enemy with the help of proper planning. Krishna had intelligence, and he himself had strength, and Arjuna had the might of success. Hence the three together could accomplish the task of destroying Jasandha. Krishna agreed to that and said that they could kill Jasandha in the battle. Sri Krishna then related the story of the birth of Jasandha. For Krishna told Dharmaraj that Jasandha had become weak and this was the proper time to kill him. Yudhishthira accepted and said that Krishna was their savior. And if he were to be with Arjuna and Bhima, the task would be accomplished. Satisfied with the words of Yudhishthira, the threesome of Krishna, Bhima and Arjuna started for Magad. The three of them attired themselves as Brahmans, observing the vow of Sneka, and entered the city of Magad. The citizens of the city were surprised on seeing them. They went to the presence of Jasandha with an air of egotism. He received them cordially. Criticizing the odd behavior of the Brahmans in Sneka Atat, Jasandha questioned them on their breaking the peak of a hillock, entering the city through the improper gate, etc. Then Krishna said that all the three castes of Brahmans, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas would take up the vow of Sneka. The strength of a Kshatriya lies in his shoulders. If he wanted to witness it, he could do so. A Kshatriya should enter the house of an enemy through the back door only. They came here on some purpose. They could not receive honor from an enemy. Surprised at the words of Krishna, Jasandha asked what animosity they bore towards him. They had mistakenly thought of him as their enemy. Then Krishna replied that only one noble person protects the whole family. They, being the followers of them, came to punish him on his order. He revealed that they were not Brahmins. His two companions were Bhima and Arjuna, the sons of Pandu, and he was his enemy Krishna. Having said this, he invited Jasantha for a combat. Jasantha refused to let go the princes he jailed in order to sacrifice them to the gods, and was prepared to fight with the three of them. Prompted by Sri Krishna, he chose Bhima to be his opponent in combat. The excited Bhima came forward to fight at the command of Sri Krishna. Both of them made thunderous sounds while fighting with each other. Krishna encouraged Bhima to kill Jasantha. Then Bhima caught hold of Jasantha's leg with one hand and parted him into two halves. Having disposed of his dead body at the main gate of the palace, the three of them went to the prison and freed the princess. Bhima and Arjuna, along with the imprisoned kings, came back to their city safely. Yudhishthira became very happy and decided to start the Rajasuya sacrifice. Krishna took leave of Yudhishthira and went to Dwarka. 5. Arjuna wanted to defeat all the kings and collect taxes from them to increase their wealth. So he requested for permission from his brother Yudhishthira to set out on a march of victory towards the north, the quarter ruled by Kuber. Arjuna's decision was hailed by sage Vyasa. He said that 22 the best guide Indian and European classical literature, the book of the assembly hall. 23 Arjuna should go towards the north, Bhima towards east, Sahadeva to the south, and Nakula towards west on victory march. The 4 sons of Kunti went on to conquer the 4 directions of the earth at the same time, and having returned to Indraprastha with great wealth, presented all that to Dharmaraj. 6. King Yudhishthira was ruling the earth in a righteous way along with his brothers. During his reign, there was never any word of any calamity. As he had sufficient wealth, he wanted to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. Krishna arrived there with different valuable gifts of gems etc., leading a large army. Yudhishthira sought permission from Sri Krishna to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice along with his brothers. Having described the merits of that great sacrifice, Krishna remarked that Dharmaraj was entitled to be an emperor, and he should hence take the vow of the performance to make their desires fulfilled. Thus permitted by Krishna, Dharmaraj, along with his brothers, started to collect the required material for the sacrifice. The responsibility of supervising the arrangements had been entrusted to Sahadeva and other ministers. Later, Vyasa brought many priests. At the command of Yudhishthira, Sahadeva sent messengers to all the kingdoms to invite people belonging to the 4 castes. The Brahmans who gathered there made Yudhishthira to take the vow at an auspicious time. The sacrifice of Yudhishthira started on the earth like that of Indra in the heaven. Yudhishthira sent Nakula to Hastinapura to invite Bhishma, Drona, Dhritarashtra, Vidura, Kripa, Duryodhan and other brothers. At that time that place shone like the heaven filled with the celestial beings. Dharmaraj, who was under the vow, welcomed them all and assigned different responsibilities to each of them. Sri Krishna himself washed the feet of the Brahmans. Dasasana was appointed to supervise the edibles. Aswatthama was given the responsibility of honoring the Brahmans. Sanjaya was asked to take care of the royalty, and Bhishma and Drona were made in charge of seeing what was done and what was left undone. Everyone was pleased and felt happy during the sacrifice. 7. On the day of performing the Abhishechaniya rite, Bhishma asked Yudhishthira to honor all the participants by offering arghya to them. When asked by Dharmaraj, Bhishma recommended Sri Krishna for the first worship, Agrapuja. Thus commanded by him, Sahadeva offered arghya to Sri Krishna according to the rules of the scriptures. But Sisupala could not bear this honor to Sri Krishna. Criticizing Bhishma and Yudhishthira, he started to chide Sri Krishna. Saying that Krishna was not eligible to receive such an honor, rebuking him in many ways, he got up from his seat and was prepared to go out, followed by his companions. Then King Yudhishthira ran to Sisupala and saying that his conduct was improper, tried to stop him. Bhishma then declared that Sri Krishna alone was to be worshipped by all. He told Yudhishthira that if anyone was not willing to accept that, there was no need to implore him. Sri Krishna was honorable not only to them but to the three worlds. The universe is established in Krishna completely. Then he turned to Sisupala and said that it was improper to behave thus with Krishna. As Krishna was well versed in the Vedas and their ancillary texts, and also was the strongest of all, there was no one else worthy of honor. On listening him, Dharmaraj requested him to explain in an order the incarnations and stories of Sri Krishna. Bhishma then narrated the deeds of Krishna briefly. Sri Krishna was in the form of Narayana previously. He is self-born and the great-grandfather of all the worlds. He first created the waters. Then he created Brahma in them. The four-faced Brahma created the worlds. At the time of the great deluge, everything will recede into him. Narayana alone will remain. Once upon a time Narayana killed the Rakshasas Madhu and Katyava by placing them on his lap, as per their desire. The fat that came out of their bodies spread all over this earth. From then onwards, this earth was called Medini. Bhishma then went on to describe the incarnations of Varaha, Narasimha, Vaman, Dattatreya, Pasuma, Sri Rama, Sri Krishna and Kalki. Having described all this, he said that if Sisupala felt that this worship to Krishna was undeserved, he could do whatever he wanted to do, and then he kept quiet. Satdeva, the son of Madri, gave a choice to those who did not accept the honor to Krishna, and completed the honor of offering Arghya to Krishna. As the worship was completed, Sisupala became livid with rage and encouraged the kings for a confrontation. A few of the kings who took offense to the words of Satdeva vowed that they would not allow the coronation of Dharmaraj or the gratification of the honor to Krishna. By that Krishna understood that those kings were prepared for a fight. 8. On seeing that some kings were preparing for fight, the agitated Dharmaraj asked Bhishma the ways to pacify them. Bhishma asked him not to worry, as a dog can never kill a lion. Sisupala, the king of Chedi, who lost his reasoning power, was acting like a lion only to send the kings to the city of Yam. Like dogs before a sleeping lion, these kings were barking but only till Sri Krishna would get up like the sleeping lion. On hearing these words of Bhishma, Sisupala reproached him with harsh words. He 24 The best guide Indian and European classical literature 25 addressed Bhishma as one who sullied the name of the family and asked him why an old man like him was not ashamed of his deed. He could not give counsel as he was in the third state. He did not know any them. Then he related the story of the old swan and said that like that swan he would be killed by all the kings. Because of him even the Pandavas stepped out of the path of virtue, and as a result considered the deeds of Krishna rightful. The mighty Bhima raged with fury at the words of Sisupala. He wanted to jump onto Sisupala. But Bhishma caught hold of him and pacified him in many ways. Sisupala, however, did not care for Bhima. Then Bhishma narrated the birth of Sisupala. In the family of the king of Chedi, a boy was born with 4 arms and 3 eyes. His parents were terrified and shivered on seeing him. They wanted to abandon him. Then a voice from sky was heard to the effect that in whose lap the boy would lose his extra hands, and on seeing whom his extra eye would recede into his forehead, that very person would be the cause of death for the boy. On hearing about that freed child, every king on the earth came to see him. The king of Chedi placed the boy on everyone's lap. Having heard this news in Dwarka, Krishna and Balram went to the city of Chedi to meet their aunt, Shrutasva, the sister of their father Vasudeva. Shrutasva put her child in the lap of Sri Krishna with affection. Immediately, the two extra of the boy fell onto the floor. The third eye receded into the forehead. His mother Shrutasva was frightened, and beseeched Krishna to spare his son's life. She requested him to forgive his offenses. Then Krishna gave the boon that he would forgive 100 offenses. Sisupala became doubly angry at the words of Bhishma. Sisupala then invited Sri Krishna for a fight. Sri Krishna counted the offenses of Sisupala for the sake of all the kings gathered there. He said that he behaved reprehensibly with him in front of everyone. He could not forgive him. On hearing the words of Sri Krishna, all the kings reproached Sisupala, who started to insult Krishna again. Then Krishna thought of his Sudarsana disc in his mind. Immediately it appeared in his hand. He then told all those kings that he would forgive only 100 offenses of Sisupala. And they were over then. Hence he would kill him then. Saying so, Krishna cut the head of Sisupala with his disc. A light emanated from the body of Sisupala. It bowed to Krishna and entered into him. Yudhishthira installed the son of Sisupala on the throne of Chedi. At the end Yudhishthira told the sages that his sacrifice was completed by their power only. His desire was fulfilled. When the sacrifice was over, Krishna went back to Dwarka. 9 After the sacrifice was over, Vyasa, accompanied by his disciples, came to Yudhishthira. The latter honored him and said unto him that Nada had apprised him of the 3 types of portents, namely, the celestial, atmospheric and terrestrial. He enquired whether they ended with the fall of Sisupala. Vyasa replied that the consequences of such portents would last for 13 years. After performing the required auspicious rites, Yudhishthira, accompanied by his ministers, entered the city. Duryodhana and Sakuni continued to stay in the palace. Duryodhana, who was astonished at the marvelous designs of the mansion, went round that building, and at one place where the surface was laid with crystals, mistook it for water, and drew up his clothes. Dismayed by his confusion, he wandered in another part of the building. Afterwards, once he felt though it was an even surface. And again mistaking a pond filled with crystal-like clear water and adorned with crystal lotuses for land, he fell into it with his clothes. Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva and other servants laughed at his confusion. Duryodhana could not bear their laughter. He took leave of Yudhishthira and went to Hastinapura with an afflicted heart. Sinful thoughts arose in the mind of Duryodhana, who was envious of the prosperity of the Pandavas. Questioned by Sakuni, he revealed the cause of his grief to him, and asked him to convey it to Dhritarashtra. Sakuni advised him not to get jealous of Yudhishthira. The latter was only enjoying his fortune. Duryodhana also could conquer the whole world with the help of Drona and others. Asked for a plan to defeat the Pandavas, Sakuni comforted Duryodhana by telling him to invite Yudhishthira for a game of dice. Then Duryodhana requested him to tell Dhritarashtra all that. Sakuni conveyed the news of the grief of Duryodhana to Dhritarashtra. Asked by his father for the cause of his grief, Duryodhana started to give an account of the prosperity of the Pandavas. And he asked his father to invite Yudhishthira for a game of dice with Sakuni. Dhritarashtra replied that he would take a decision after consulting Vidura, his learned counselor. Then Duryodhana threatened that if Dhritarashtra would not do as he asked, he would kill himself. The doting Dhritarashtra conceded, and having passed an order for building a mansion sent a messenger to fetch Vidura. Vidura tried his best to stop the dice play, but in vain. Dhritarashtra said that he believed in the power of fate. By the divine wish only this dice game was going to be conducted. Having listened to it, the depressed Vidura went to Bhishma. After listening to Vidura, Dhritarashtra advised Duryodhana to drop the plans of dice game. But Duryodhana did not agree. He said that he was laughed at by Bhima, Sri Krishna, Arjuna and Draupadi also when he was confused in the Mayas. The Book of the Assembly Hall 26. The Best Guide Indian and European Classical Literature 27. Mansion. Dhritarashtra tried to convince Duryodhan. But Duryodhan was not convinced, and on the other hand he tried to provoke Dhritarashtra. Sakuni supported the dice game and encouraged the construction of the dice hall. Dhritarashtra agreed to his son's advice, and ordered the workers to build the hall to be named as Toran-Sphatika. Accordingly, the masons built the hall within a short time. On receiving the word that the hall was completed, Dhritarashtra ordered Vidura to bring Dharmaraj to him. Again Vidura tried to dissuade the king from doing such a thing but failed. But at Dhritarashtra's strict command, he went to the city of the Pandavas and met Dharmaraj. After accepting their welcome, he conveyed the invitation of Dhritarashtra and added that the king got a hall similar to Mayasabha constructed. He desired that all the brothers should gather there to play a game of dice. Reluctantly Dharmaraj accepted that invitation. The next day Dharmaraj set out for Hastinapura along with his brothers, relatives, servants, Draupadi and other womenfolk. During the journey, Vidura revealed to Yudhishthira of the motive behind the dice game. Yudhishthira met Bhishma, Drona, Dhritarashtra and others at Hastinapura. Having spent the night there, he finished his daily chores in the morning and went to the dice hall. Sakuni invited him for a game of dice. Yudhishthira knew that people like Sakuni gamble deceitfully. Still he had to agree. In reply to his question, Duryodhan said that Sakuni would play on his behalf and he himself would put all types of gems at stake. The game started. Sakuni won all the stakes. Yudhishthira lost all his treasure. Seeing that the game was being played very harshly, Vidura told Dhritarashtra that in the form of Duryodhan Jackal was living in his house. He seemed not to understand it. Maddened with gambling, Duryodhan was becoming the cause of a great calamity. For the welfare of the worlds, it is better to abandon a son who is on the wrong path. Having advised him thus he said that if ordered, Arjuna could arrest him. Then both the Kauravas and the Pandavas could live happily. As he spoke thus against the dice game, Duryodhan started to rebuke him. Then Vidura said that in this world one can find people who speak agreeably. But it is impossible to find one who speaks unpalatable but useful words, or one who listens to such words. Duryodhan could do what he wanted to. He would not interfere. Yudhishthira lost all his property in the dice game. Then he put his brothers and at last himself as his stake, and lost. Then he staked Draupadi. Then all the aged persons that were in the assembly expressed their disapproval with the words of, "Fie! Fie!" On seeing it Vidura bent his head and fell as if unconscious. Sakuni, the son of Subala won her also. Duryodhan ordered Vidura to fetch Draupadi and made her sweep the assembly hall and also to tell her to live with the servants. Vidura said that Draupadi could never become a slave as Dharmaraj lost his right to stake her as he lost himself first. Duryodhan however disregarded Vidura, and instructed the Pratikmi to bring Draupadi to the assembly. Accordingly, the Pratikmi went to Draupadi and told her that Duryodhan had won her in the game of dice. And he had come on his orders to fetch her to make her do menial work. During her many questions to the assembly through him, Draupadi asked him to go to the assembly and enquire the noblemen present there as to what she should do then. Pratikmi returned to the assembly and put the question. Knowing the resolution of Duryodhan, everyone bent his head and sat silently. Then Yudhishthira sent a message to Draupadi through a messenger asking her to come to the assembly in whatever condition she might have been in, and stand before her father-in-law weeping. His idea was that on seeing Draupadi entering the assembly hall, everyone will rebuke Duryodhan mentally. Then Duryodhan ordered Pratikmi to bring Draupadi to the assembly. On seeing his hesitation, Duryodhan instructed Dussasana to forcibly bring Draupadi. When Dussasana tried to catch her, Draupadi ran bitterly weeping towards the ladies of Duryodhan. But he seized her by locks and dragged her to the assembly hall. On seeing the plight of Draupadi, Bhimsena became extremely anguished, and got up angrily looking at Yudhishthira. Arjuna somehow pacified him. Having observed the distress of Draupadi, Vikan, one of the sons of Dhritarashtra, said presenting a matter related to them that as Dharmaraj lost himself first and then put Draupadi as stake, the latter should not be considered as one. But Karna opposed him, and asked Dussasana to disrobe Draupadi. When Dussasana started to remove her clothes, she began to utter the name of Govinda for protection. Sri Krishna, remaining unseen, covered her with different clothes. Then Bhima took an angry oath that he would drink the blood of Dussasana, tearing open in battle the latter's chest. Having dragged many clothes, Dussasana sat down tired and ashamed. Vidura asked those assembled to answer Draupadi's question. But no one said anything. When Draupadi requested for justice from those present there, Duryodhan asked her to leave that question to her husbands Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula and Sahadeva. If they refused to give Dharmaraj the authority of staking her, then she would be released from slavery. When Bhima got angry at his words, Bhishma, Drona and Vidura mollified him. Karna told Draupadi that from that day onwards all the sons of Dhritarashtra were her lords and not the sons of Kunti. He asked her to choose one of them as her husband. The Book of the Assembly Hall 28, The Best Guide Indian and European Classical Literature 29. Duryodhan asked Yudhishthira to answer Draupadi's questions, and having uncovered his left thigh showed to her. Then Bhima took the oath that he would break that thigh of Duryodhan in battle. Arjuna asked the Kauravas to decide whose master Yudhishthira was, having lost himself in gambling. At that time a jackal entered the firehouse of Dhritarashtra, and started to cry loudly. On hearing it, donkeys and fearsome birds also started to make inauspicious sounds. Then both Gandhari and Vidura appealed to Dhritarashtra about it. On hearing their words, the king considered Duryodhan as an offender and told Draupadi to ask for boons. Then, as her first boon she asked for the release of Dharmaraja, and as her second boon she obtained the release of the other Pandavas. She refused to ask for the third boon even though Dhritarashtra wanted to grant it. Dhritarashtra allowed Yudhishthira to go to Indraprastha along with his brothers and Draupadi. He asked him to forget the whole episode. Having accepted it, Yudhishthira went to Indraprastha, accompanied by his brothers and Draupadi. 10. Duryodhan, Karna, and Sakuni, having resolved to take revenge on the Pandavas, went to Dhritarashtra. Duryodhan told his father that they desired to gamble once more with the Pandavas on the condition of going to forest. The defeated should retire to the forest, attired in deerskin, and stay there for 12 years. In the 13th year they should live incognito. If they were to be discovered, they should again live in the forests for 12 years. Dhritarashtra accepted his son's proposal. But Drona, Somajukta, Bahika, Kripa, Vidura, Aswatthama, Yuyutsu, Vurishravas, Bhishma and 6 Karna opposed Duryodhan's idea. But the doting father Dhritarashtra sent for the Pandavas. The virtuous Gandhari also advised the king to abandon for the sake of the family. Dhritarashtra answered that even if the family were to be destroyed, he could not restrain Duryodhan. By his order the Pratikmi went to Yudhishthira who was going towards Indraprastha, and told him that Dhritarashtra instructed him to return for another game of dice. Yudhishthira said that that invitation for gambling would be the cause of destruction of their family, still he could not go against his order. Saying so, Yudhishthira returned with his brothers to gamble again. Later, another round of dice game went on with the above-mentioned conditions, and Yudhishthira lost again. As per the conditions, The Pandavas, wearing deerskin, took the forest-dwelling vow and prepared to go to woods. Then Dusasana jeered at Draupadi, speaking insultingly, and encouraged her to choose one of the Kauravas as her husband. The angry Bhima repeated his oath of piercing the chest of Dusasana. When Duryodhana also laughed at them, he said that he would kill Duryodhana in the battle of Pandavas and Kauravas. Arjuna would slay Karna. Sahadeva would kill Sakuni. Nakula took the oath of killing all those sons of Dhritarashtra who insulted Draupadi. Accepting Vidura's request, Kunti stayed in his house. Having bowed to Bhishma and Drona, and having taken leave of Kunti, Yudhishthira went to the woods along with his brothers and Draupadi. Vidura took Kunti to his house. Dhritarashtra also was upset over the sinful deeds of his sons. In reply to his question, Vidura described the mental state of the Pandavas and the citizens. Drona said that after completing their stay in the woods, Pandavas would return and take revenge on Kauravas without fail. On hearing the words of Drona, Dhritarashtra overcame with grief, and sent Vidura to bring the Pandavas back. Sanjay criticized the misdeeds of Dhritarashtra. The latter told Sanjay that he did not want a fight with the Pandavas as they were stronger than the Kauravas. So he requested him to see that peace prevailed between the two sides. Essay type questions with answers Q1.